So welcome, everyone. We are so excited that you're here tonight for our Legal Careers panel. My name is Joan Marceau. I'm the undergraduate internship and career coordinator for Rockefeller College. And we like to do this panel at least once a year, actually, usually both semesters. As part of our internship course, but we also love to invite other students who, invite other students at the university who are interested in legal careers to join us for this panel as well. So whether you're part of class or just joining us for the panel, we're glad that you're here. The panel will last about an hour. We have three alums joining us. Two are already here, and my guess is Will is on his way, probably running a few minutes late from work today. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and spotlight them so that their faces will be nice and big on the screen, and we'll have them get started by just introducing themselves a little bit, telling us a little bit about where they, went to law school, what they majored in when they were at UAlbany, what their current job is, any previous positions they've had, just kind of a quick overview. And then I've got a few questions to get us started if need be, but we really want to spend most of the time answering the students' questions. So if you have questions, if you're in the room, just raise your hand and we will ask the questions. If you're on Zoom, you can either use the raise your hand feature, and we'll call on you to unmute and ask your question. Or if you're not able to do that, you're welcome to type them into the chat, and Emily will keep an eye on those questions in the Zoom as well. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with Angela and Jimmy. I'll spotlight you guys, and when Will joins us, we'll add him to the spotlight. And Angela, why don't you go first? Go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your legal career.
Okay. So I went to law school right after Albany, and I graduated from Albany in '88 and graduated from law school in '91. I started my legal career at the Manhattan DA's office, which, for those of you who don't know, it's the office that right now is prosecuting former President Trump. So it's been in the news a lot in the last couple of weeks. I was there until 2000, and in 2000, I went to be then Mayor Giuliani's domestic violence director. And from there, I went to New York City Children's Services. After that, I went to the law department. That was in 2005, and I was the deputy division chief of the family court division, which is in charge of juvenile prosecutions as well as interstate child support. I was the deputy chief for 5 years and then became the chief in 2010. And I was there at the law department until 2020. And at that point, I left to go to the Queen's DA's office. I was there for 2 years as an executive. And now I am at the National District Attorneys Association, where it's a nonprofit that does trainings for prosecutors all over the country. And I'm in charge of juvenile justice trainings.
All right. Excellent. Very impressive.
Jimmy,
go ahead.
I'm Jimmy Johnston. I'm an associate at Skadden Arps. They're like a large law firm in New York City. So I'm an alum of the MPA program. I graduated in 2016. I actually went to undergrad at SUNY Oneonta. I studied music industry, which was kind of random. I used to DJ weddings before law school. I thought maybe I wanted to be like a wedding planner or something for my career. I got involved in student government in undergrad. I really loved that. That's what kind of led me to public policy. I thought, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to law school yet, but I knew like I had a passion for public policy. So I did the MPA program, which I would highly recommend if anybody's considering it. It was a great program. Really loved public policy. I was interning at the state budget office. I did a 1-year internship there. It was a really great experience. And that's what kind of got my interest in law school. For example, I was observing some of the state budget hearings, and I remember like sitting in a room, and it was like my supervisor, like going up to like 7 levels up to like the budget director, who had been working her whole career to work her way up at the budget, at the budget office, sitting at the table with like 2 younger lawyers in their 40s that were like negotiating the state budget. And I kind of got this idea that like, oh, if I went to law school and like worked in law for a little while, like I could, get to work on cooler issues or that sort of thing, or get more involved. So I kind of decided to make the jump to go to law school. So I went directly after the MPA program. I went to UC Berkeley out west for a few years for the 3 years of law school. And I knew I wanted to settle down in New York, but I just like, I knew I'd always wanted to see the West Coast. I was kind of like, this is my last shot to just kind of go 3 years, no strings attached, just go check out the West Coast and then come back. So did law school out there and then interviewed and came back to a firm here. So I work in the commercial litigation group at Skadden. So just doing like representing big companies and commercial lawsuits and securities lawsuits. I'm still, figuring out exactly what I'm gonna do with my whole life, that sort of thing. But the nice thing about like starting at a big law firm is like you can continue working at a big law firm, you can stay working in private practice, but then if you also decide to do something different, it provides like so many open doors for you to like either go and work at a company or go work in government or all sorts of things. So kind of got a lot of options and just kind of at the beginning of my career right now.
Excellent. Thank you. And Will, thank you. We're just starting with introductions. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about, where you went to law school, what your undergrad degree was in, and where you're currently working and have previously worked.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And first of all, sorry I was late, everybody. I was just on another call with a client. William Mack here. I graduated from University at Albany in the year 2000. I was a political science major there. While I was there, I did a fellowship at the University of Michigan. I studied abroad. I tried to make the most of the experience, like I'm sure all of you are. And if you're not, that's my first suggestion. After undergrad, I went to law school at Columbia. I graduated from Columbia in 2003. I went to work at Skadden Arps, like Jimmy. And I was at Skadden. A lot of people go to work at Skadden Arps because it's enormous. It is also, you can't be on a call with New York lawyers without at least two of you having worked at Skadden at some point. It's like the focus point for all New York lawyer networking. It's people who have worked at Skadden. After Skadden, I, like Jimmy, didn't really know what I wanted to be as an attorney, but I went there because I knew I could figure it out while on the clock. I went and I clerked for a federal judge in the Southern District of New York. And then I decided I was going to be a litigator. I'd been corporate at Skadden. And I went to a firm called Quinn Emanuel, where I was a litigator. I was restless. I wanted to try new things. I'd had a little time in politics while at University at Albany. I did the New York State Assembly internship, and I joined the campaign of a United States senator who thought he'd run for president, Barack Obama, in 2008. That campaign was successful. We had a good result. I was in Nevada, came back to New York for a little while, and then got a phone call one day from someone in the White House. They asked if I wanted to go work there. I immediately hung up on them because I thought it was a prank call. They called back. And I went to work in the White House in counsel's office for 3 years. After 3 years in the White House, my wife told me I had to get a real job and come back to New York, where she was. And I did that. And I went to work at FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority in New York City, where I was a securities regulator for a couple of years. After doing that for a while, again, my wife said I had to get a real job. And so I went and I switched sides and started doing this very same thing, but now I do it at a law firm. I'm a partner at a firm called Greenberg, Traurig. We have an office in Albany, by the way. And I've been here for 10 years. I co-chair the firm's financial, regulatory, and compliance practice. And I am a 34 Act lawyer, an Exchange Act lawyer, which is just a boring type of corporate lawyer, but I love it. So that's me. I'm Will Mack.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, let me get you started with just if each of you could just share what is your favorite thing about being an attorney? What is your favorite thing you do as in your current position as an attorney? And I don't know if you want to go in the same order. If you do, Angela, you can go ahead and go first.
Okay. Favorite thing about being an attorney, I think, is just avenues that open for you as an attorney and the paths you can go down. There's just the lawyers, a law degree really opens doors for everyone. And so I think it's a great degree to have. In terms of my favorite thing about my current job, I mean, I love working in the juvenile justice system. So to be able to do it in the national arena is truly an honor.
I would probably say the same. I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but part of the reason why I wanted to go to law school is I didn't want to close any doors. I wanted to keep every door open for me, and especially, still trying to figure out what I want to do like long term. And I just felt like if I hadn't gone to law school, I felt like I would be kind of like a cog in the machine in state government, trying to like work my way up and figure out what I want to do. And just like seeing all the lawyers that would work at it, especially work in the private sector for a little while, but then end up going into government, just like have so many doors open. And it's kind of like I feel right now like I could basically do anything. Like I could go work for a company, I could continue in big law, I could go to a small law firm or a boutique, or I could go work in government. I could go work at like an agency like the SEC and specialize, or I could go work at like the U.S. Attorney's Office or State Attorney General's office, or do something like that, like a government prosecutor. I could also like go into politics or go into policy. I just feel like I haven't closed any doors, and that's kind of the versatility of it. And I think like a lot of the other panelists can attest to is like you also don't have to do one thing your whole career. Is like you can jump around, you can try something out for 5 years and do this, and you can have a career doing so many different things. It's really cool. So I guess that was one of my worst fears, is kind of just like working in one office, and then like 10 years goes down the road and I'm 40 years old and I'm like, I didn't really like this, I want to do something different, and it's too late, that sort of thing. So I like that, kind of every door is open and I can always move around and try different things.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I did that. I may continue. A friend of mine who's not a lawyer describes lawyers as weaponized librarians. And I think there's a lot to that, right? Like, we're a librarian, but with a purpose. And I did enjoy at Albany. I do enjoy now research and writing. And I get to do that all day. And it's always something new. And occasionally I'm given new facts and new law, and I get to go learn that. So that's why I like being a lawyer.
Excellent. Do any of the students have questions? Give you an opportunity. I have more, but I like to. Okay, go ahead, Lisa. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I have a question for William Mack. Are you in any way acquainted with Sam Nijam?
Yeah, I know Sam. Yeah, I know Sam well. He's a partner of mine. How do you know Sam?
Oh, he was our professor for last term, and he worked in the same company that you worked in, the Greenberg trial.
Yeah, he's still there.
Yeah.
I'll give him your regards.
Thank you.
Excellent. While you're thinking of other questions, why don't you tell us, and I know this is always a silly question, but what is a typical day like in your job?
Angela, you want to go first again?
Sure. Typical day. I mean, every day is different. And I think throughout my career, every day has been different, but it's basically a combination of, like, right now I'm working on preparing these regional conferences around the country. And so it's a lot of work in terms of getting speakers, like identifying the right speakers, researching people to see if they're the right speaker, like watching them on YouTube if they've spoken before, and deciding like what the content should be at each training that we're doing. We have training set up tentatively in Los Angeles, in Houston. We're doing one with New Jersey next month. So we're basically like putting these trainings together. It also involves like not only the legal aspect of it, but the logistical aspect of it, in terms of how much the grant will pay for, because we're 100% grant funded. And we're also have to get all the locations. We have to make sure everything is okay with the hotels. And although like I have people helping me with that, I still have to like weigh in and make the ultimate decision about what we're going to do. It's talking to people all around the country about juvenile justice issues and what's going on in their jurisdiction, and if there's anything that we can do at NDAA to help them. It's preparing training materials for all different trainings. We're doing a training with one of the New York City DA's offices on teen dating violence. So we had a meeting with them this week to talk about that. We're doing another training on ghost guns. Ghost guns are a very big issue right now, and across the country. So it's like reviewing ghost gun materials and talking to the presenter who's going to train on ghost guns, and just making sure that he's covering everything that we're asking him to do and things like that.
I would say it depends on like the stage of the trial of where you're at too. So for me, we just completed like a big arbitration, which is similar to a trial. It's just like there's a little bit differences. Like there's no direct examination. You do it written testimony and then you do cross examination, but it's similar to a trial in a lot of ways. So it just would kind of depend on where we are in the stages. So there's like the initial kind of a lot of research and writing, and then doing the briefs, and then doing the different witness statements of written testimony. Then as we got closer to the trial, it was a lot of working with the witnesses on prep and prepping them on different questions they might be asked, and doing a lot of different like outlines and thinking up every question they could possibly come up with, that sort of thing. And then doing the actual trial, it's a lot of just preparing as it goes through each day, trying to come up with figuring out what the directions are, things are going, how can we prepare, get all of our facts together, that sort of thing. And a lot of deposition outline, or not deposition, but cross-examination outlines. We're like outlining all the potential things that could come up, that sort of thing. And then afterwards, now we're into post-hearing briefing. So we're doing back to the research and writing. But I would say like as a big law attorney, especially as a more junior associate, I'm a fourth year now, it's a lot of reading and writing, a lot of working at the computer, that sort of thing. A lot of just like researching issues and then kind of doing like email memos to my supervisors. It's definitely not like, at least on the corporate side, working at a big corporate law firm, you're not, especially as a more junior associate, you're not like in court every day, or you're not doing a lot of trials. Like, if you're, I know some other associates who are like, 6th or 7th or 8th year associates who they've done like 2 or 3 trials in their time, which is pretty typical, I would say. Like, so it's a lot of, I would say, don't think it's necessarily going to be like Law and Order. It's going to be like a lot of working at a computer and researching and writing, and the occasional trial for sure.
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. My day is looking at an actual day right now. It's 2 or 3 in-person meetings and 3 or 4 Zoom meetings. That's my day. But in
It's like
between
my
that,
day.
yeah, I think that's a work day, right? In between that, I'm researching, I'm writing, I'm drafting things, I'm negotiating. On a really fun day, I might have defend testimony. I don't take testimony anymore. I might have a meeting with the SEC. That's exciting for me. And of course, then there's the business of law, right? In addition to being a lawyer, as a lawyer, you've got to sell your services as a lawyer. You really have 2 jobs. Well, when you're in private practice, not in government. And so when I'm not being a lawyer, I'm out trying to sell myself and my firm.
Excellent. We have a question from Lisa, and maybe Will, I'll let you start. How do you find the perfect work-life balance as a lawyer?
Oh, I thought I was going to ask you all that. I don't know. I'm still looking for it. Here's the thing: when you first start out, you're going to be working more hours than you would like. But as you grow more senior in the profession, you are able to work fewer hours. That won't always be true if you've got an event, a trial, a hearing, whatever, a closing. You're going to work hard. You're going to be up all night. You're going to put your kids to bed and then go back to work. You won't always have good balance, but you can achieve it eventually. and one more thing, part of it is just experience. I think I know I can see how transactions or investigations are going to happen over the course of their lifetime, because I've done it many, many times before, and therefore I can plan my life accordingly. But that only comes with experience.
Do either of you have anything to add?
I would say, I think a lot of it depends on where you work too. I mean, there's a lot of folks who start out at big law, when we say big law, I think it generally means like, firms with, 500 or more attorneys or something like that. And that's kind of, the bigger firms are known for, more hours. And I think there's a lot of people who will work a few years at a big law firm, and then they'll end up going to like either a smaller law firm or government or in-house that is known for having less hours and more predictable, like closer to a 9-to-5 sort of thing, and not necessarily all the time. But I think it's like also just a highly personal thing of what you want. There's no right answer as far as going to work at a big law firm or a small law firm or in government. I have a friend who works at a small plaintiff's side firm. And he probably makes like half of what I do, but he has more work-life balance. Like he has like regular things he does on weeknights and schedules where like has different hobbies and stuff. And there's no like right answer. And I think it's easy to kind of always like want to chase prestige and stuff, but then there's also just like more to life and your family and that sort of thing. So I would say it's highly personal, but I think it's all, it all comes and goes. I think the most challenging part of working in big law is just like the not necessarily always having control over when you're busy and when you're not, but like in the average year, you're going to have months where you're slow and months where you're busy, and just like learning how to kind of just go with the flow and enjoy the slower times when you can and work with the busier times when you can is that's the biggest challenge.
I think that finding work-life balance is very difficult. I agree, that it depends on where you work and what your goals are. I think that it's much more of a hot topic these days than it was when I graduated. And so like when I graduated from law school, nobody was asking in interviews, like, what's the work-life balance here? And, when I started my career in the Manhattan DA's office, I wasn't making the money that the people who went to Skadden were making. Was making like a fraction of that. And we had to work night arraignments. We had to work 4 to 12 writing up cases. We had to work weekends. Back then we had what was called the lobster shift because crime was really high. So arraignments had to go from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. on the weekends. So I don't think they have lobster shift anymore, but there was no work-life balance, nor did we think about it. We just thought this was all normal. And I think that over the years, and especially like in the last few years, there's been a lot more attention to work-life balance. But I'll be very, very honest with you. At the end of the day, the work still has to get done. And so, what I find is that when employers start saying like, okay, everybody leave at 5, you don't have to work past 5. But then what happens is work doesn't necessarily get done. Emails don't get responded to because everybody thinks that they can leave at 5 and shut off. And it's just not, it doesn't always work. And again, and I think Jim said this, that it really depends on where you work and what choices you make. But I think if you want a really good work-life balance, you have to seek it out, and you will find it, but it may not be in the job that you want to do. You may have to do something other than what you're very, very passionate about. It's just, everyone has to make their decisions.
All right. Thank you. Angela, the next question is for you also. What inspired you to go into juvenile justice?
I had worked in the adult criminal justice system for a long time. And I was at Children's Services at the time when a juvenile justice job came up. And it just seemed so intriguing because juvenile is just so different, because you're not focusing so much on like how much state prison time someone's going to do. You're really focusing on how to rehabilitate kids and how to, what has to be done to make sure that a kid doesn't enter the criminal justice system, that the juvenile justice system actually helps the kid. So, and that was back in 2005, and I'm still intrigued by that, and it's still a challenge. And I mean, I don't know how many of you saw this case in Florida last week, where there's like a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old being arrested for murder of 3 other kids. I mean, it's just horrific. And so I think, now with like gun violence being so prevalent across the United States, I think that everybody's, struggling with how to prevent juveniles from picking up a gun and how to rehabilitate juveniles who are already involved in gun violence.
Excellent. Angela, there's another question for you. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but someone is starting the paperwork for a 501c4 nonprofit that's a youth-centered organization, and was wondering about, can you make a career in a nonprofit like that? Do you have any kind of background or information that might be helpful to the student?
I mean, I think you can make a career in nonprofit, definitely. I think that, nonprofits, the way that their budget works is something that you really have to become an expert in. And it can be difficult to find funding for nonprofits. It can be difficult to find grants. But I think that if it's something that you want to pursue and that's your passion, I would just say make sure you're taking like all the right classes, whether it's at Albany or somewhere else, about like how to run a nonprofit, and most importantly, in my opinion, is how to manage the budget in a nonprofit, because you have to be able to manage the budget in order to succeed. But I think it's definitely doable, and I think I would encourage you to do it.
All right. There's a question from, and I'm going to pronounce your name wrong, I'm sure, Moraniki, asking what's a skill you developed in school that has helped you? And you said you helped you outside of work, but I'm not sure if you mean that or if you mean helped you in your job. So if you can unmute or clarify your question, that would be really helpful. Or type it in if you want to clarify.
It was meant. Oh.
I mean, just in your job. Yeah. So a skill that you developed in school, something you learned in school that's really helped you in your job now or in one of your jobs. Do you want to go ahead, Will?
Yeah. In Albany, I did a lot of research and writing, and that's everything, right? That's what I do. And that's where I learned to be a good writer and a persuasive writer. So that is my answer.
I would also say like short professional writing. And I would say for me, I did my MPA before law school, and the MPA program is really, really good about drilling down like short professional writing, as far as like they would just drill it over and over again of like, this is too long, your boss is not going to read this. You need to, like, if your boss is going to walk into a meeting 30 seconds from now, they need to be able to glance at the summary and be able to understand what your main point is. And they have this, drill down approach of like, what's the 30-second version? What's the 1-minute version? What's the 5-minute version of making sure, if you do a 1-page memo, how it's skimmable and, they can skim to the section they need, that sort of thing. And I would just say like a lot of that really came from the MPA program and not from law school. I think like law school legal writing, the legal writing classes teach you kind of like long form of like write a long form 25-page brief, like the kind of thing you'd file in court, which you need to know. But I would say as a junior associate, when you go to work in a law firm, like 90% of what you're doing is not the long form brief writing. You're kind of doing like short email memos for your supervisors. So I would say like getting that from the MPA program and outside of law school is really helpful, because I think that's just the bread and butter of what you're doing on the day-to-day, especially as an associate. And I think just kind of anything you go work in your career. I mean, obviously we live in a post-pandemic world, but even before the pandemic, even when we were working 5 days a week in the office, like even if my supervisor was 3 offices down, I would be like drafting an email memo to send them. I mean, just like so much of what we do is via email and being able to get your point across really quick and that sort of thing.
I think I agree about like writing, but I also think that, like the internships that I had at Albany, I worked at the Albany County Bar Association, and the Albany County Department of Probation just gave me some just good work experience that has helped me. And, I mean, I still remember everything that I did in Albany, and that type of work, that it's still on my mind today, how that's influenced me. And also just getting along with people and navigating relationships. You have to do that in college with roommates and sweet mates, and some people you may get along with and some people you may not. And that's a really important skill to have in life, whether it's at work or outside of work.
Excellent. So the questions are coming in fast and furious now. So, and I'm going to start throwing them out, and feel free, if you don't all three want to answer each of the questions, if you can feel free to just nod and say ditto, that's fine too. But the next question is, did law school prepare you for the work of being a lawyer, or did you actually have to just be thrown into the field to learn how to be an attorney?
I think I kind of covered that with my answer I just gave on writing, so I'll defer to Will and Angela.
Defer to me. So I think the answer to that for me is no. I don't think it prepared me at all to be an assistant district attorney. But I do think that now law school is much more like experience based than it was when I graduated in 91. So I think that students have a lot more experience because they do these clinics in law school, and many, many law schools have them. And I would recommend that if you're looking at law schools, you look at the clinic programs that they have and see if they have things that interest you, because I think that it's a really great way to get experience. So even though I would say no for me back then, I think law school has changed significantly over the years. And I think that the right clinic will help you become a lawyer and will help you in your first job.
All right. So how did you view being a lawyer? How did your view of being a lawyer change from when you were in law school and now that you're working? What's the difference between your expectations when you were in law school and the reality now?
I'll start. I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't have any family that were lawyers. I didn't have any friends that were lawyers. I didn't know a lawyer. So I kind of showed up at Skadden on day one, all right, what do we do here? That changed quickly because law is an apprenticeship profession, even still. And so I learned from the people there how to lawyer. But it leads me to another thought, which is actually responsive to one of the questions that was put in the chat. It's a good idea to get some life experience between college and law school. The very best lawyers I know were people, the very best lawyers I know were people who did something else before law school. It actually makes them better at being law students too. Go work in a field you're interested in, because remember, we lawyers are, we're all industry based, right? I work for the financial services industry, and I had some experience in the financial services industry before law school that would have been useful. So if there's an industry that interests you, I would recommend taking a few years off and working in it and then going to law school. The best way to do that, though, is to apply to law school now and defer.
Yeah, and let's jump to that question, and then I'll come back to Sophia's question. But they were asking if any of you did a gap year or more between college and law school, or if you would recommend going straight into law school. Do you have other opinions about that whole kind of process?
So I went straight to law school, and I think that it's valuable to get experience before going to law school. But what I worry about, with people, is whether they're going to get used to having money and then not wanting to go back to school. So it's a very personal decision that you have to make, but you have to think about, once you get out there and you're making money, can you go back to living like a student? And can you go back to taking tests and doing all that once you've been out of it for a year or more? And again, I just think it's a very, very personal personal decision. I'm just reading the chat in terms of, I think that question also says if you could make any changes to your journey on becoming a lawyer. I guess that, opportunities I had to do different things, maybe I would have taken advantage of them more. And like, I just recently did pro bono cases, and I still have pro bono cases. So I have like these 2 immigration cases, and they're great. I just wish I would have gotten that type of experience earlier in my career.
Right. Another question that's in the chat is from Sophia, who said, as someone who's majoring in psychology, are there any fields of law or jobs that you've worked in or are familiar with that incorporate psychology practices in the everyday work, being an attorney? Got any interaction or experience with that or thoughts?
I mean, I think psychology and criminal justice, there's a lot of overlap there. I think psychology and juvenile justice interact. There's definitely a lot of counseling that goes on. And so sometimes it's done by people with, psychology backgrounds and things like that. So I think psychology comes up a lot in criminal justice and juvenile justice.
I'm not an expert on psychology, but because I didn't take any psychology courses in undergrad, but I would say I think on a smaller level, there's a lot of psychology that kind of comes up just in general, being a lawyer, of thinking that it's a lot of figuring out like, how is the judge and the other side going to take this, and negotiations, and figuring out how you can best sell this in a way that, a human being hearing this story will take it. We just had like I said, a big arbitration where we're representing kind of a smaller company that was supposed to get bought out by the bigger company, and then the bigger company backed out. And a lot of our trial prep and our storytelling was just kind of trying to tell the story of why you should feel bad for the smaller company, because they really worked hard and they did everything right, and they're the ones that got the short end of the stick. And I don't know to the extent that helped, but I think even just like in writing briefs and in going to trial and that sort of thing, it's a lot of just trying to sell your story in the way that's the other humans on the other side are going to best understand it and be the best advocate for your client. I'm sure there's probably a lot of psychology that would come up a lot that could be useful.
Excellent. Avery, come on up. Avery's got a question in the room.
Hi, I wanted to ask, what tips do you guys have for law school admissions or the application essays, especially if you do have that kind of prior history, that prior career going for you? You've kind of set up your life in a different way and didn't expect to go back into it, and then sort of had a kind of coming to terms with your decision to go to law school. How would you encapsulate that in an admissions essay? And what do you think kind of made yours pop and allow you to get into such prestigious law schools?
My first piece of advice is apply early. Get your application in whenever the first day that they accept these things is, probably sometime in August or September. That will give you a better chance of getting into every school you apply to. As to your specific question, as Jimmy was saying, being a lawyer is sometimes about being a storyteller. And you need to tell that story in an extremely concise manner, in a way that hooks the reader. I don't know specifically what that hook will be, but it's an immensely personal thing. If you email me, I'll try to dig up my old personal statement. I'll send it to you.
All right. Any other advice on the personal statement or application process as a whole?
I would say my biggest thing, just generally to start, is like to really study for the LSAT. And I don't know where you are at in the process, or if you've already taken it, but I would say to the extent anyone in the room, Ron, is thinking about it and it's early in the process, I would say really like treat it like a job, treat it like, oh, this is like a 4-credit class I'm taking this semester and I'm going to schedule it. And I like literally print off a calendar, like schedule how many hours a week you're going to do it. I mean, the cool thing is, growing up this day and age with the internet is like you have so many resources at your fingertips. I didn't have any family who were lawyers. I just kind of figured it out on my own. But the nice thing is like you can go online, go on the internet, and you can connect with like everyone from across the country who scored in like the 99th percentile, and you could read about what they did and what their study strategies were, and you could really figure it out. And I would definitely recommend doing that. Like the first 5 hours or 10 hours of your LSAT study should just be like studying what other people did and how they studied, the people that did well. But I would say, I think when I started studying, like the common piece of advice I read is people who did really well spent like between 200 or 300 hours studying for it. So I mean, like really like a year in advance or 6 months in advance to like really start studying. It's like it's a marathon, not a sprint. Really putting in the time. I would highly recommend that. I would say for like the admissions essays is definitely just like telling your story. And really, if you can show like really thoughtfully like why you want to be a lawyer, I think it's a big thing. I think maybe one of the, I don't know, I never worked in law school admissions. I worked in admissions a little bit on the side in the MPA program, but I would say I know that a big thing for law schools is they want to accept people who like really want to be lawyers, because part of what law schools get ranked on is by the amount of graduates that go into JD required jobs, and it actually like dings them if people go to law school and then decide not to be lawyers. So I think just a little thing is just like really showing that you've really thought about it and that you're really set on wanting to go to law school. And if you have like a great unique story of why that is, like that's great. But like just showing that like you've really thought it out and like you're really prepared and you know what you want to do. And if you don't know exactly what type of law you want to practice, that's cool. But just to show that like it's not just like, oh, like my parents were lawyers or my friends, are going to law school, so I just thought I'd throw my hat in and see what happens. I haven't really thought about it. Like if you can show that you really have thought about it, researched it, and really determined to go to law school, I think that will help.
Other questions? Lisa.
Hi, I'm sorry. I have one last question.
Don't
So
apologize for having questions. We love that.
thank you. So if any of you dealt with the issue of imposter syndrome in law school, because I've heard that the environment in law school is a very competitive one. How did you deal with that?
So two stories. I'll keep it short. So I showed up to Columbia Admitted Students Day wearing a blue blazer and gray slacks and a red and blue striped tie, because I thought that's how kids in the Ivy Leagues dressed. But I'd never been on an Ivy League campus before. I looked like I was going to Hogwarts. I just, I didn't have a clue. And so from day one, I kind of had this chip on my shoulder, or at least worry that I wasn't as good as all these other kids who had gone, most of them, at least half of them, to Ivy League schools and schools like Stanford. But after, first semester grades, when my grades were as good or better than my colleagues, at least my friends amongst whom we discuss these things, I realized I was as good as everybody else. But then, you graduate and you're at SCAD and then you go through the whole thing again. And that leads into the second story, and I'll keep it short because I know we're short on time. I clerked for a judge in 2005. Sorry, when I was in law school, I interned for a judge. She was a judge in the Southern District of New York. And she had just been elevated from the bankruptcy court to the Southern District. And she said, and I think I was having a similar discussion with her. I said, do you ever feel like you don't belong? Because I do. And she said, well, when I got into Harvard Law School, I thought, oh my God, they're going to figure me out. I don't belong here. I graduated from Harvard and I was, working at Debevoise, and I thought, oh, they're going to figure me out. I don't belong here. I became a bankruptcy court judge, and I thought, oh, they're going to figure me out. I don't belong here. I got elevated to the Southern District of New York, and then I just thought, you know what? I do belong here. If I didn't belong here, I wouldn't have done all those things. And I'll remember that conversation the rest of my life because of the impact it had on me. She's right. if you're there, you belong there. Admissions, they don't make those kind of mistakes. They make other mistakes, but not those.
I think law school in particular it can be a very difficult time. And so just to the aspect of your question, you know, how do you deal with it? Whatever it is, whether it's imposter syndrome or something along those lines. I think one of the things that's important is to choose a law school where you have an outlet other than law school. So like, I don't recommend going to law school in the middle of nowhere. I would go where like you have people, family, friends who are not in law school. And so that, or a place where you're going to have an interest outside of law school that you can pursue, so that your life is not like 100% law school, because it has to be a big percentage of your life. But you also need something in your life, in my opinion, that's not law school. And I do think that it's like, you know, in your whole career, people are gonna want to make you feel that like you're not as good as them. And I think as time goes on and you see like where some of those people end up and where you end up, I think you kind of realize that that's just going to happen, but that your great things are going to happen for you and you're going to accomplish great things in your life and in your career. And, you know, I think a lot of it is you have to figure out who to stay away from in law school, and what conversations to stay away from. And it's not always easy because, you know, law school is relatively small. And so you're with like a small group of people compared to SUNY Albany. So I think that it's a lot of just, you know, figuring out how to spend your time and who to spend your time with and who to stay away from.
Great. Any other questions in the room or on Zoom? So I did, one of the students did ask if they wanted to follow up with you, if you're available, what's the best way to reach you? Email, LinkedIn, whatever, you can let me know or put it into the chat. That would be helpful, and I'll share it with the rest of the people as well. But that would be great. And then maybe we can just wrap up. If you could just have each of you share your best advice to students who are considering this career path. What would you recommend that they do now or in the process of applying to law school or starting their first job? What would be your best advice to someone considering a legal career?
I guess I would say two things. Number one, like I said, like study for the LSAT. I think every hour you put in studying for the LSAT is going to pay off in dividends for the rest of your life in terms of earning potential and jobs and doors open in law schools. You can get into all that and scholarship money and all of that. So I think it's just really worth all the time you put in, and definitely a study for the LSAT, take it really seriously. And then the other thing, just like have as many conversations like these as you can, just like anything that you, if you're interested in a field or you're interested in a type of law, like finding somebody, especially if they're a U Albany alumni or anybody, like finding someone who's in that career and just like getting lunch with them or you know, having a Zoom coffee with them for an hour and just like picking their brain about like, what do you like about your career? What do you not like? Why did you pick this job? Like I've always found those conversations to be invaluable, just to try to figure out like the different options and what's out there in the past that people have gone and what they recommend.
I'd say while you're an undergrad, try to experience everything the university has for you, which often means going outside the university. Do the study abroad, do the internships, definitely do the internships. If there's an internship and they don't offer it, you can probably still do the internship. Do it for no credit if you have to. Learn, get experience while you're in law school. As Angela said, do those clinics, take courses at the university if they let you. Mine did, which was wonderful. Have real life work experience, try new things, keep exploring.
I agree with all that advice. I guess what I would add to it just personally is at the end of the day, when you've gotten advice from everybody, and I agree that it's important to get advice from people and to talk to people, but at the end of the day, you have to follow your heart and your passion and make your own decisions. And don't be pressured into doing something that other people think you should do. And it could be, you know, going into a certain career. It could be going to a firm versus government or a nonprofit. It could be, you know, going to school in New York versus California, whatever it is. Listen to everybody, but at the end of the day, make your own decision and make sure that you're not making decisions under pressure from anyone.
That's great advice for anybody, not only related to law careers. So thank you so much. I do want to, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Any last questions floating out there from any students? All right. So again, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we know you're very busy people. It's always great to hear from you and give the students a chance to interact with you. So again, have a great evening, and we will look forward to seeing you again, I'm sure sometime soon.